evening and welcome to Other Voices, brought to you by Peninsula Peace and Justice Center. I'm your host, Paul George. During the presidential campaign, Donald Trump called the historic nuclear agreement reached between Iran and 5 Western powers the worst deal in history. Shortly after his inauguration, he imposed a new round of sanctions on Iran after that country tested a ballistic missile, something perfectly legal and allowed under the nuclear agreement. Meanwhile, Iran is holding its own presidential elections coming up in May, and it just might be that, much like the United States, Iran will elect its own hardliner. What will all that mean for us and for the world? And to help us figure that out, I'm really pleased to welcome back Dr. Ali FERDOWSI, Professor of History and Political Science at Notre de Namur University, and a person who travels frequently to Iran to keep your finger on the political situation there. And we all have sore thumbs from keeping our fingers on the political situation. Ali, welcome back to Other Voices.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Now, you haven't been there for a while, right? But
yeah, about 8-9 months ago.
Yeah. So, but I know you still follow the situation closely, and I do want to talk about the upcoming elections, but let's look at the U.S. and Iran and where that all might be headed. Let me ask you first, though, since this has been recently in the news, just the recently announced travel ban. I know that won't affect you, but surely you must know a lot of academics who travel back and forth. What kind of effect or impact do you think this is going to have?
Oh, huge already. Oh, I am a member of the International Society for Iranian Studies. As members in many, many countries, Europeans, United States. And we often hold it here in the United States. But this year, actually, and it was planned to be held here at the
an annual conference.
Annual conference, yeah. On the side, it's a large organization. First of all, we were concerned because previously the visa situation about dual citizens or those who have traveled to Iran and other countries under President Obama, that if you were a European, you hold one of those 36 countries that they could travel to the United States without visa or getting a border visa. But if you went to Iran and you came back, even if you were a British citizen, then you had a hard time to come here. But then
just for having
having visited Iran.
Visa
having visited Iran, if you were a member of EU, or if you were an Iranian dual citizen of England, say, and Iran, then you could have not come easily. But under Obama, it was kind of lightly enforced. So still we could internationally communicate. But this year we were supposed to have our annual conference here in Riverside, California.
Yeah.
And now a lot of people cannot come because a lot of our scholars, because the International Society for Iranian Studies, a lot of these people are Iranian professors, Iranian scholars, Iranian researchers. So we are talking about tens, maybe hundreds of people who would not be able to make it to the United States to attend the conference. So the last thing I know, we were thinking about where should we hold the conference? Should we go to Canada, to some other place? This has always been a difficult problem.
Yeah.
Because also the Iranian side, the Iranian government is not always happy to see them, the Iranian scholars, come and mix and mingle with us in the West.
Yeah.
Because they think that, both sides think that, we sort of, in some way, corrupt each other.
Yeah.
And,
you academics.
Yeah, we academics. Yeah, we corrupt them in favor of understanding what's going on here, and then vice versa.
Yes.
We get tainted because everybody is terrorists out there.
Yeah.
And so we
international understanding.
So,
when was this conference scheduled for? How much are you scrambling to reschedule it?
I'm not sure about exactly. This is next summer, But I'm not sure what I mean, I've not been up to date on to what the plans are.
Yeah, you're not on the planning board or anything.
I'm not on the planning board, but I know that this is like a big issue with us.
Yeah, but I imagine even beyond, that's political sciences, there's similar academic, international academic
Oh yeah,
groups
I mean
in
that's just one
sciences.
example. All these Iranian scholars, scientists, and Iran is actually, and that's one of the issues. One of the you see even the list of the 7 countries and the 6 countries that Iran is included in it. There has never ever been anyone born in Iran who's committed any terrorist act here on the U.S. soil. But the reason, part of it is Iran is in some sense a regional power, which is not on Team USA. And because of that, there is kind of a little bit of a push and pull about the reshaping of the power politics in the Middle East. But that being said, part of it is because Iranian scholars are very good scholars. They're extremely good scholars. We know them here, like Stanford. I mean, some of the top professors here are from Iran.
Yeah.
It's just not about only Iran. I mean, many of these countries that we don't like have, they're more, particularly the countries that have managed not to get into a big war, like Iran or India or China. They produce top quality scholars.
Yeah, the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, they've been putting out a lot of studies of how many Silicon Valley CEOs are from Iran and these other, the 6 countries, and how many doctors, and I imagine a lot of students from Iran studying in
A lot of them, especially here at Stanford.
Yeah. And it's not clear what's going to happen with them and their
No, I mean,
college
and my
careers.
own nephew is a student here from Iran. We are not sure. My own hunch is, and I could be exaggerating, my own hunch is that there is an attempt at a reversal of many things, in healthcare, in our concepts of diversity, of inclusiveness, and I've read the text of the new text of banning the people from the 6 predominantly Muslim countries. The promise is that actually this is going to get worse. I mean, if you read the text, the text is not saying
this is a first step.
This is the first step.
It's clearly saying this is temporary. More is coming.
More is coming because as we know, President Trump has promised that would be a complete and total ban of Muslims coming, and I think they are starting with most vulnerable Muslim countries, the ones that, unlike say Saudi Arabia, that actually has had. It's
quite a number of them.
But they are allies and they are in some way, collaborating. But I think that they are trying to, starting with the 6 countries, I think ultimately they will expand it. My own hunch actually is that this is also, I mean, I think a lot of people would agree, this is at the same time related to the proposed wall between Latin America. It's not Mexico. It's really making sure that the brown people on the other side of the border would not come here. It's just about, so when we say let's go back, we are going to go back to a particular white male dominated concept, as far as back as we can take it now.
I think it's important to keep in mind when you're talking about this new administration that it is not a conservative government, it's a white nationalist government.
Exactly, and they're very radical about that.
Yeah. All right, well, let's look at one particular place where Trump promised to reverse things, and that's, as I mentioned in the intro, what I think of as the historic nuclear agreement between Iran and the United Nations and 5 major Western powers. A breakthrough diplomatic achievement after all these years of no diplomatic talk. He has not actually said a whole lot more about the agreement and pulling out of the agreement since being sworn in. And there's just been a couple of hints that it's under review somehow just in the last couple of days, because the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Commission Administration, had its most recent review conference looking at how Iran is complying with the details of the nuclear agreement. This is the first such meeting to take place under a Trump regime. Yesterday, before the meeting, Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel had a talk on the phone, and we don't have a readout from the White House yet, but the Israeli government put out a statement that said the two leaders spoke at length about the dangers arising from the nuclear deal with Iran and Iranian aggression in the region, and the need to work together to deal with those dangers. So just your initial thoughts on that. We've talked about this agreement back when it was first passed, when you're on the program, but let's remind people what role this fills, how important this agreement was.
Oh, it was extremely important. I mean, at so many different levels. But by the way, just to add to what you just said, Netanyahu is going the day after tomorrow to Russia to speak with Putin regarding this issue. So there are certain, I would say, hints or activities going on that seems like they are going to push in some way to undermine that agreement. My own hunch is that the agreement is vulnerable now more than ever.
And Russia, of course, is one of the signatories to this agreement.
And exactly. I mean, and that's that would get us into a whole lot of details as to what's going on in terms of actions and counteractions. But let us just say, as you just said, about the importance of that agreement. The importance of that agreement under Obama was that with Obama, a new approach to Middle East was being tried, and that was more a diplomatic approach. In this time around, unlike the Iraq case or previous cases, U.S. would not go into a war in the Middle East and try to basically destabilize the region in order to get what it needs to get. Or if I'm not, or if it couldn't get it, at least make sure that the whole problem would be solved, not by solving it, but by devolving it into chaos and civil war. Because if a new picture of politics, a new picture of stability is going to emerge in the Middle East, and that picture is not liked by certain factions within the U.S. power system, then either you go and solve it peacefully, or you just basically make sure that that picture is not going to take hold. I mean, there are two ways of solving a problem. One is solving it, and the other one is just eradicating the problem by basically stoning it back to before the problem. And so President Obama tried a new approach with Iran, and I think wisely in so many ways. Because Iran is a much larger country. It's much harder to take on Iran in terms of costs of war.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, U.S. can defeat Iran, no doubt about that militarily. But
it would come at a high cost.
But an extremely high cost. I mean, both immediate costs, unlike Iraq, because Iran is a lot more prepared to fight the United States. And Iran is a historic country. It's not a creation of, like Iraq and many of these countries that were created in the span of 20, 30 years between First World War and Second World War, and a little bit after. Iran actually has one of the oldest continuous states in the world. And as we speak, even India and China cannot claim that. From 1500, Iran has had one system of state, one configuration of power. Different regimes and governments have come and gone, but as a state, it has maintained its own statehood.
And therefore identity.
So identity is very strong, is very deep, and so the Iranian government has been preparing for it forever, because what they saw happening in Afghanistan, what they saw happening in Iraq, feeling vulnerable, feeling a kind of a strategic vulnerability and lack of support anywhere, everywhere, and partly, of course, of their own fault, but partly because of the international configuration of power. Because of that, so immediate expenses. Now, I think that's enough said about that. But also, I think in the sense that the foreign policy of Obama administration with respect to the Middle East was, and he kept saying that, regional power, Saudi Arabia, Iran, you better find a way of living together. So let's bring the level of tension down, and let us make sure that you kind of learn how to share your neighborhood. Yeah. And that would be a way for the United States to still be influential, but not through war. But it seems almost obvious to me that we now are in a different foreign policy perspective and situation here. I think with Donald Trump and what I know about the region, that the language that Saudi Arabia is using, or the language Iran is using, the language everybody is using, the languages that are being used, and we are talking barely a month or so, and already the language in the region is moving in the direction of confrontation and kind of a zero-sum game that somebody should lose, and for somebody
can
to
only
win.
be one winner.
One winner, and all of that. That is dangerous insofar as, there was a book by, I think, a professor, of Oxford historian. I really recommend for people to read that book. It's a very historical book. It's not at all a political science book. It's a very well-argued by Margaret, I forget her last name, Margaret
Maybe it'll come to you. What's the title of the book?
That's why it's basically the argument, and I will come back to it.
Okay.
Basically, the argument is that we are very close, or we have a situation which is similar to the situation before the First World War. And
that's not encouraging.
It's not encouraging. In some sense, it makes sense. And very quickly, look, we are not living really finally the end of the two world system, the Cold War, where things were locked onto to one block and the other block, and the two big guys sort of between the two of them, each one of them could control its her own team, United States and Soviet Union, and now there is no real sheriff in the world, and there are all these multiple governments and trying, and so because of that, there's a lot more chaos. There's a lot more entropy in the system. It's very much like the weather system now. It's kind of very unstable weather system politically as compared with during the Cold War. And so, to make a long story short, her argument is that, okay, you have the rise of China, which is like the rise of Germany and a new world power. The old power is no longer capable of maintaining the order, and then and you have a situation in the Middle East which is like the Balkans, like Serbia, like the Balkans, about the First World War, where accidentally a war kind of starts. It's not like Donald Trump will plan to go to war with Russia or with China or really something bigger. But just prior to the First World War, what happened was it was completely accidental. And nobody thought, actually people did not think that there is going to be a war. And the war happened. And so the fear is that in the Middle East, if you don't solve the situation in the Middle East correctly, that is probably the most likely place for bad stuff beginning to happen between Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey then getting involved, because it's really about the regional picture. And then Russia will get involved because it's so close to its border. It's just like, Iran in a sense is in the immediate.
It's in the neighborhood.
There's a neighborhood of Russian power. So just to conclude, so there's an immediate issue of the rising temperature in the Middle East, and then there's really the global threat. I mean, people, if they ask me, are you worried about the United States becoming fascist? Donald Trump could become fascist, and we could experience elements of fascism. But my fear is more than fascism is really the possibility of a world war. I worry about that. This is really my concern. So the nuclear agreement was an attempt to bring Iran into the picture, particularly knowing that the vast majority, the public opinion in Iran is divided, but it's really rare in the entire Middle East. And this has been confirmed again and again, including by Israeli telephone surveys in Iran, that Iran is the only Muslim country where most people like United States. And there is a vibrant civil society. There is a vibrant cultural. You saw that. I mean, there only a few countries have managed to win Academy Awards, kind of so closely to each other, and that's one example of it. Here at Stanford, we have Professor Maryam Firuzkhani. She's in her 30s. She's the first female ever in the entire world to win the Fields Medal in mathematics. Which is like the Nobel Prize in mathematics. So the universities are producing, it's really vibrant. And so the idea under Obama was that, okay, we should really start helping this trend in Iran, this trend that actually has some representations inside of the big picture, not necessarily at the top, but inside of the big picture. And, but now we really are drifting away with the new policies. We're just going to the other end.
With the nuclear agreement being a major diplomatic breakthrough, and the first one with the United States since the revolution, and it was clear, President Obama said this many times, it was a very specific and narrow agreement on the nuclear program. And there were plenty of other issues still on the table. For example, the ballistic missile program and all kinds of stuff. What happened to the momentum? There was no follow-up. And I know the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, did not have the full backing of the government, certainly, for the nuclear agreement. Was it a wait-and-see sort of thing before they tried to build on this diplomatic? And part of it was Congress trying to put sanctions right back on after the agreement. Is Iran not feeling enough relief from the sanctions as a result of the agreement that there was no following? It just didn't seem like anything came out of that first big building block.
Oh, excellent question. Yeah, I mean, from both sides. In Iran, Iran is very much as a political system. I know here we usually say that, oh, there is one supreme leader. And obviously supreme leader has the strongest voice in Iran.
Yeah.
Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei.
We don't call our guy supreme leader yet.
Yes, supreme. This obviously. But look, I could tell you one thing. Coming from Iran, American politics now looks so much like Iranian politics. Completely at home in both places now. And actually, again, I think one of the implications of the end of the Cold War is that the leveling of politics throughout the world. The politics in France, in England, in Germany, with Brexit, in Iran, in the United States, is all becoming almost the same kind of politics. So there is no longer two types of politics. There's only one type of politics, and it's no longer there's a third world, or their politics is different from ours, and we are United States, how could our... It's just really becoming almost the same structure, the same game of politics everywhere. It's just very similar now. It's very similar. The language that they are using, the disrespect for facts, that one team decides our guys like a prophet, no matter what they do, is right and is good, and the other side is very much now the kind of game of politics that previously we would not associate with a advanced democratic system like the United States. It's not very much the same. But going back to it, in Iran, there are these various elements, and Khamenei's power is not 100%. Khamenei has to manage all the factions, and his really ability has been so far to manage them, to pit them against each other, to make them work, and all of that. So the idea was, Rouhani and Zarif, his foreign minister, they had promised that we do that, and probably their idea was, let us go on. And we all said, and including myself, everybody who had to say something about this, write something, and I wrote about it. In Iranian papers, I wrote several articles supporting the agreement and explaining what needs to happen next. So one of the ideas was, we should build on this momentum. This should not be the first one. It would be extremely vulnerable if it's not, it doesn't evolve into a momentum. And if there's one deal, it becomes very weak and very vulnerable. Khamenei came and he put a test. And he said, we cannot trust the United States. You know, you hear here American politicians say you cannot trust Iranians. You have heard that. Usually we say that here. The same thing is being said in Iran. We cannot trust the United States. In Iran, there always is a story of the 1953 coup against Mossadegh. U.S. is not our friend, U.S. is not, so we cannot trust. Khamenei came and put a test. He said that, he declared that. He said, let us see if the Americans will carry out their promise of lifting sanctions or giving us sanction relief. Obama tried, but as you know, ultimately, I think honestly and truthfully tried his best, and John Kerry did try. They did try their best, but they had the Congress to deal with, and they had all the other stuff to deal with. And then you have the whole strong lobby of Saudi Arabia and Israel and all those people who they had to deal with. And so they could not. And so Khamenei came and said, look, we made a deal. I told you don't trust the Americans. Look, they did not deliver on their promise. The fact of the matter is, Iran, insofar as the nuclear deal was concerned, kept its promise.
Yeah.
I mean, it is internationally. No one says that Iran did not.
As this meeting...
As even as this meeting. So far Iran has kept its side of the bargain. But U.S. did not. You know, almost Iranian banks are mostly shut out. Just a couple of days ago, as you know, Iran was accused in some courts in New York for having been involved in September 11 terrorist attacks. Obviously, Iran was not. It was not Iran. Everybody knows it was not Iran. But because Iran refused to go to the court, does not recognize American courts to defend itself, the courts ruled against Iran. And so they basically put about $50 billion of Iranian money and asset is now set aside to be paid to the victims of September 11, not Saudi Arabian money.
Jeez.
That even according to congressional, as you know, the famous 28 pages redacted that nobody knows about. Not Saudi Arabia. Iran is supposed to pay for September 11. And a couple of days ago, Luxembourg put $1.5 billion of Iranian, again, what they had in Europe. Pressure from the United States, what they have in Europe, again, another $1.5 billion of Iranian money that now cannot be returned to Iran because it has to be paid to the victims of September 11. They have to be paid. I completely think they should. But they have to find out exactly who was responsible, and those who were responsible have to pay it. And any government that was behind it or allowed it or made it possible. I mean, I completely agree with that. But I'm just saying, from the side of Khamenei, that means, look, U.S. did not, so we cannot trust United States. So there can't, he said, let's wait for 6 months. If they kept their promise, we will do next thing with them. We will deal again with them. And this has been a repeated thread. I can't go, because then it would be designed to be one-sided. It's not, they are not also the best people on the other side, this government in Iran. But one thing that needs to be said is that, for instance, right after September 11, or in the invasion of Iraq, not because the Iranian government was selfless. Iran and Iraq were fighting with each other for 8 years. Actually, I lost my own cousin. My mother's sister's son was killed in Iran-Iraq war. And so Iran said, we help. Iran said, we will help with that. When the United States invaded Afghanistan, Iran actually helped. And Americans even today admit that without the help of the Iranians, because the Iranians knew exactly what's going on in Afghanistan in terms of where the forces are, where the Taliban are, where everybody was. And Iran was fighting Taliban. Iran was supporting the Northern Alliance. Taliban was supported by Pakistan. These are, again, regional rivalries between Iran and Pakistan. And so what happened was Iran helped. President Bush went on TV and put Iran on the axis of evil.
Yeah.
So there is this concept that you can't trust the United States.
Yeah, I think I read something that Ayatollah Khamenei said, we shouldn't have just offered our help. We should have asked then what we're going to get in return.
Exactly.
Because
and that's
what
they
they
were saying.
got in return was being part of the axis of evil.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, actually, and he said, okay, from now on, if U.S. wants something from us, right at the bat, we should know what U.S. is going to give us. And President Obama was not in a position to give anything new.
And
neither this.
Just to be clear, this nuclear agreement was not just with the U.S. and Iran. It was a multilateral. The other countries have followed through on their part of the agreements?
They have, but insofar as they are, the U.S. is their #1 major business partner, and so insofar as the banks are afraid to deal with Iran, even European banks are hesitant, and they are not dealing. So some minor, smaller banks, but major international banks are yet to allow Iranian access to the banking system.
This is something I think a lot of people don't understand, that often there's sanctions not imposed legally or through an act of Congress, but through sheer intimidation from the State Department going country to country and saying, I suggest you not do business, or going bank to bank. That's how a lot of the embargo against Cuba was carried out.
Right.
No laws or anything. It was just somebody at the State Department would show up at a bank and say, I suggest you not open this account.
I mean, there are also on the other side, and that's because that's important about knowing it. There is on the other side, as I just said, Iran is also politically divided. Not divided in the sense of Iran is a danger. I mean, Iran's division is kind of normal political division, like United States. Various factions fighting with each other, but it's not a civil war. It's a political kind of infighting. So part of the political establishment, we have this Trumpism in Iran too. People who are against opening your borders and sharing the world and moving ever so slightly, because I always have my students to do an exercise. So take one idea, and I force them to really push it all the way to its absolute, most radical conclusions of it. If you push the things in the world, really absolutely, there are really two views of the world. One is, let's hide behind our walls, let's build new walls, walling everybody, let's be afraid of people mingling because it's dangerous, and anybody's danger could be from someone else. For a Muslim, it could be, I don't know, the fact that somebody like Scotch could be dangerous. But or American culture could be a corrupt culture or material. You see what I'm saying? Everybody's idea what's threatening to them is different. And at the same time, of course, U.S. military is a threat to everybody. Outside of the United States, of course, not to the United States. Otherwise, in terms of budget, maybe it's still a threat to
Huge
our
threat
health
there,
system, the educational system, health system, and all of that. But what is happening there is this other. So there is a faction in Iran that does not want Iran and the United States get closer, because their interest is in Iran not being part of the global system of relationships and exchanges. And so basically, U.S. not living up to its word gives this other side ammunition not to allow the political picture in Iran to be shaped in a way that would bring people together. Because I think ultimately, really, we say globalization, and I know it's a little bit philosophical, but we say globalization. And globalization has created its own momentum for those of us who are truly for globalization, not necessarily the globalization of capital, but the globalization of people, globalization of accepting that there is only one home and with different ideas and different looks, and let us share it, and sort of going beyond the concept of countries with the standing armies as the most important value in the world, to move into the next value system in the world. And then there are people who are afraid that they want to, in their slogan, when they say "Make America Great," the again part is really what? The again part is, it's the again part that gets me. I'm all for making America great. But again part is obviously meaning returning to a different system of the system value. And so that's an opposition to the new one, making America great in a new way for the 21st century. Is a different idea that I think we would all agree with.
I do want to get quickly, very soon, to our audience, because we always want people who attend here to get in on the conversation. But if you could, and this is probably not fair to ask you this, but if you could quickly handicap the upcoming presidential elections in Iran. It's May 19th, I believe.
Right.
Rouhani is going to run again, presumably.
Rouhani, he's going to run again in politics. Anybody who predicts anything,
we don't have a real good track record around here right now.
But yeah, I think he's going to run. I still think that he has the best chance of winning.
Popular support.
Popular support, certainly. Look, it's not so much popular support. It's like, how would I say, when I say Iranian politics is a normal politics like United States, is that it's between Trump and Hillary Clinton at the Iranian level. It's not, Bernie Sanders, and it's not really, for a lot of Iranians, the Bernie Sanders of Iran has no chance to win. I mean, if it was presented, he or she would win. But I don't think at the moment that's really on the table in Iran. What is on the table is really Rouhani, which is a candidate that most Iranians would say, hey, look, this is better than this other guys, because we don't want to have a war. And certainly he's not for war. And Iranians are not for war. Iranians are not for. Iran has not initiated. Iran used to be a warrior nation. If you were one of the Iranian neighbors, you would have seen, like 200 or 300 years ago, like if you were India, they would constantly attack you. But Iran has been a country that actually for the past 250 years has not initiated a war, has lost almost half of its territory, and has not even claimed that it has lost it. Just let it go, let it go, let it go. And has not initiated the war, even with us. So they are afraid of war, they don't want war. Of course, Khamenei says that any Iranian who says that is actually helping the enemy, because if the enemy thinks that Iranians don't want war, then we'll start intimidating Iranians. So Iranians have to keep saying, we want war, we are a warrior nation, we are very... And they bluff like Saddam Hussein, because their idea of how to stop United States from attacking you is huff and puff. constantly show they are like North Korea, that you are crazy, and you know, like, you know, so that's for the faction in Iran, that's the idea. But most Iranians are really, I would say, vast majority of Iranians are not with that way of protecting the country. I think most of them are protecting it by finding peaceful ways and maybe calming down, and for the moment, just letting this, you know, 4 years or 8 years to pass.
We've got a little bit of huffing and puffing going on in this country right now, too, don't we? All right, let's get the audience in on this. If you'll just wait for Crystal to put up your hand and wait for Crystal to arrive with a microphone so people who are going to watch this on video can hear you. Are you scratching your head or raising your hand? Put it all the way up if you would stand up, please. And hold the mic, it's on.
Okay. So when I think of Iran, I think of Ras Mirkarimi, who he was a supervisor in San Francisco, and then he was like the sheriff or something. And really, of all the people I've heard of, he did the best job of taking on the two-party system in a meaningful way here. And I just respect that a lot. But the other thing is, for some reason, when I think of Iran, I think of pistachios. And I'm like, do pistachios have a role in Iranian culture?
Well, actually, they do. They do. And it's part, actually, it's in many Iranian rituals, pistachio is on the table, yeah.
Thank you for that question. Anybody else ready with a question? Help us out here. Speaking of foodstuffs, I understand that beluga roe is in trouble, and that's a big export.
Yeah.
In Iran. In researching for tonight, I came across they're having trouble with
the question of food is a totally different topic. We get to it.
Yeah. All right, we've got a question here.
Well, I don't think my question is closely related to food. Going back to your description of the failure of some of the hoped for commercial interactions amongst the various countries that have been sort of intimidated out of doing business with Iran. In particular for the U.S., there's been the question of whether Boeing would be able to follow through on its planned deal with Iran, and I'm unclear as to where that stands now. I was hopeful that that would be the start of a better environment.
The deal has not yet been canceled, but it really has been a lot slower moving forward.
Could you describe for those who don't know what the deal is?
One of the first things that Iran did, okay, this is another, really what I say, and I don't really mean to sound like that, because it seems like it's one-sided, and it's not. But after the Iranian Revolution, and I have to admit I was one of those people who was in the revolution, I supported the revolution. After the revolution, Iran had agreements. Iran's basically the airplane fleets, jet fleets were from Boeing. And the contract said, this is in the contract, that the Boeing should serve the airplanes that it has sold to Iran, the spare parts, you know, all kinds of stuff. One of the first things in the sanctions was they sanctioned selling spare parts to Iran, even for their civilian aircraft fleet, air fleet. So then what happened, airplanes began to fall off the sky. And because of the sanctions for the first really 10, 15 years, 20 years at the beginning, because Iran has been under sanctions almost immediately after the revolution. Iran has been under one of the longest sanction regimes, and certainly one of the most heaviest and most serious sanction regimes. I can tell you a story. Like Iran was not even allowed to get on the internet until professors from Sharif University one day from the basement of Sharif University through a line in Italy appeared on the internet. Huh. So it was completely domestically invented from almost scratch because the US would not allow the technology to be sold to Iran. But so the spare parts were also. So the idea was after this agreement that we would get the United States sell new airplanes. And that was so huge because so many people were dying. Iran is a relatively large country, and it has a relatively large diaspora population. So a lot of people are flying in and out of country or inside of the country from one place to another place. So without really this servicing of their airplane, and India, the oldest, I think now, fleet of of Boeing airplanes anywhere. They kept fixing it, and basically cannibalizing the old ones for the new ones. So to make it long story, so the idea was Iran would buy a couple of hundred, actually $1 billion worth of airplanes from Airbus and Boeing. And still we have not seen any of that because of the international sanctions. And so one of the things that Khamenei side are complaining is, look, you made an agreement, by now we should have had some Boeings flying, new ones, and they are still not getting it.
Is there any official reason given for that?
Apparently there were, you see, this is the thing, like there were a few big ones that they said that they could be, and this is another problem, that they could be of dual use. So one of the problems that Iran has is many of modern technologies or modern equipments are dual use. And so if it's dual use and your sanctions says, oh, Iran is allowed to do this, but they have this high-end computer that you need for certain research, but it's dual use, can be used for military purposes, then you cannot have it. And then U.S. sanction applies to it. If they can say that you can use it, because the problem with that nuclear deal was only for the nuclear thing, not for the missile technology or Iran's aerospace technology. So what they did, basically, they said that there are parts from some U.S. companies that Iran should not have. So Airbus, apparently they decided they can only sell the smaller ones because certain parts that are U.S. made can be taken out or something like that. So it has become very complicated and kind of a headache to get the airplanes that you need, civilian airplanes.
Okay, good question. Thank you. Are there any other questions out in the audience? Come on, folks, think of something. What about some of the other countries involved in the agreement? Are they starting new investment in Iran?
Yeah, actually they do. I think Europeans, at least European governments as we speak of, because as you know, a number of them are vulnerable to a kind of a Trump takeover.
Yeah.
But the ones that now are really still there, the way that they used to be there, they all are trying to basically help Iran.
You mentioned Airbus in that.
Right.
Are they delivering the planes?
They are eventually, not yet. Still, no airplane has been delivered.
Yeah.
At least last time that I checked. I'm pretty sure, but since I spoke, I want to make sure that and I'm not 100, but pretty much almost 100%. But like Sweden, the Prime Minister of Sweden was in Iran last couple of days. And they said, okay, we will help. German industry really heavily, because Germany used to be Iran's #1 business partner. Germany and Iran have a relation. You see, one of the reasons Iran was invaded during the Second World War, Iran has declared neutrality, but yet was invaded. The excuse was there are 600 Germans living in Iran. And you should expel them. And Iran said, they are engineers, they have built our railroads, and we cannot expel them. And so anyway, then the Allies invaded Iran. But so Germany and Iran have a very long-term relationship. So they are trying to really revive that, because during the sanction regime, it sort of trickled into a very small little amount of money. So Europeans, I think Europeans understand, because if Iran collapses, which is very unlikely, but it can, U.S. is big, powerful, mighty empire. If it puts its pressure and its weights on you, you crack. A country like Iran can crack under the weights. The countries like China, India are hard to crack, but a country of the size of Iran is crackable. It's not like, a third size of Iran, say Iraq, but still. And so if it does, then the whole Middle East will. the Europeans have to deal with the mess. As we invaded Syria, we invaded Iraq, we allowed the ISIS to be created, basically, not allowed, but it happened as a unintended consequence of the invasion of a country that we really did not have to invade. And I'd say my cousin was killed by Saddam Hussein. It's not like I have any sympathy for Iraq or Saddam Hussein. But so what happened? The refugees, where are they going? They are not coming here. Trump is complaining about. But it's there in terms of hundreds and thousands of them, they are moving to Europe. So Europeans know Iran is almost immediate neighborhood of Europe. So if things really blow up in the region, Europe will have to deal with a huge mess. And Europe considers Iran actually one of the rare countries, few countries in the region that has managed, even as much as people have tried to destabilize it, because it doesn't have really any allies. And as much as U.S. has spent money to foment terrorism and separatism in Iran, is the only country that is relatively safe. I mean, the amount of terrorism in Pakistan, in Turkey, in Afghanistan, in all the neighboring areas of Iran is many, many times larger than Iran, and almost non-existent.
Yeah.
And when it is, it's really mostly done not by the kind of terrorism that we see in the region. It's like, I don't know, nuclear scientists in Iran are terrorized, by...
Professor, what is Iran's stance on refugees? Are they open for refugees? Are the
They
people
are.
also supportive of that?
Iran is actually one of the countries with the largest refugee population in the world. They are welcome at some level, meaning that officially they are welcome. But when they come to the country, the infrastructure to help them and take care of them is not there. So I have been there, and they really suffer. Their situation is awful. But we are talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of refugees in Iran.
Wow.
Yeah.
From Syria? And
From Iraq, from many, because again, the weirdest of things is that, as you know, other than Iraq is the Kurds, the only country that is actively involved fighting ISIS on the ground is Iran. And so, yes, Iran has been open to the refugees from Iraq, to refugees from Syria. A part of it is selective, of course, because it's not selective, officially selective, but a lot of these people, like Shias running or Kurds running, so they come to Iran. If you're a Sunni and you are affected, you probably will go to Jordan because of the kind of the religious, sectarianism. And this sectarianism, I grew up in a Sunni city. I don't declare what my own religion is, but pretty much grew up a Sunni, in a Sunni city. And we had majority Sunni, minority Shia. I did not know all through my middle school, high school, who is Shia, who is Sunni. Then after the situation with Afghanistan and Iraq, it's now tense. It's like going back to the Iron Century, the 30-year wars in Europe. Protestants and Catholics now at each other's throat. This will be pushed back to that kind of a level of intensity of sectarian fight, which we didn't have before.
Any other questions in the audience? We're down to the last few minutes. Can you briefly, because this might be a flashpoint, one of the main accusations from the West, from the United States, has been Iran's support of one side in Yemen. Personally, I can't find any evidence for much support, but can you just, we only have a couple of minutes left, but address that, because that could very well be a flashpoint or an excuse for some kind of military confrontation with Iran.
Yeah, that actually it could be. I agree with you. Iran certainly is supporting the Houthis. But it's not a military support. It's not a huge support. But it certainly is supporting them. But to say that Iran is
Financially, is that what you mean?
financially supporting them, but Houthis are in no way absolutely a creation of Iran or a stooge of Iran or fighting for Iran. They had a civil war, two sides in Yemen, and Iran took the side of one group, and Saudi Arabia the side of the other one. And the idea is, the fear is that the Saudi Arabians are thinking that if Iran's influence in Iraq is going to stay, then they have to balance it by, getting Yemen under their control. So it's a lot of it's regional rivalry. There is absolutely, we should acknowledge that there is a regional rivalry between Iran on the one hand and Saudi Arabia on the other hand. But to say between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to quickly say that, between Iran and Saudi Arabia means between Iran and the U.S. coalition in the Middle East.
Okay, and we're about have to leave it right about there. Any closing thoughts? That was a pretty good summary between the U.S. coalition and almost everybody else. What should we be watching for in the immediate future? Anything we can do
I
as
think that
citizens here?
insofar as that issue is concerned, and to me that issue is really important, I think
And
that
30 seconds.
we have to really pay attention to everything domestically and internationally that can put us in a position of an accidental war in the Middle East.
Pay attention. Dr. Ali FERDOWSI has been my guest. Thank you very much for joining us here again.
Thank you for having me.
You've been
Thank you
watching
so
Other
much.
Voices, brought to you by Peninsula Peace
Thank
and
you so
Justice
much.
Center. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.